getting where it's hard to just determine because it seems like just about every other shipment of something has got salmonella or something wrong with it.
My daughter, one of my daughters is sort of like a naturalist, and she rarely buys anything that's boxed, canned or anything like that, and she's been asking me to try it.
I'm thinking of figuring out a way to put me a little garden in my backyard.
Oh,
I think
but she left it last time.
Just in case she doesn't get
kind
here.
of hard to not
She left it at our last supper.
roll.
Good to see you.
You look good.
So cute.
I don't think I've had more than 25 at any meeting this year, but that was more than we used to get. Prior to that, I think we could get about 6. But the most I've gotten is 25. All right, I need to write that down, Donna, because I'm going to forget it. I'm going to forget it if I don't.
You got
How are you? Yep. Nice to see you. Good.
Good afternoon.
President Pro Tem?
Yes.
Good afternoon,
Couple
sir.
minutes late here. Good to see you.
All right, ready for the marathon.
Yeah, exactly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the 27th session of the 11th Council, special meeting on a budget agenda. At this time, could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Dora, could I please have roll call?
Carrington,
Present.
Goodman,
Present.
James, McGinnis, Nicholson.
Here.
Parker,
Present.
Rutherford. Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. At this time, can I have a motion to excuse council members from this meeting for personal reasons?
So moved.
Support.
Been moved by Councilman Parker, supported by Councilman Nichols, that we excuse Councilwoman James, Councilman McGinnis, and Councilwoman Rutherford for personal reasons. At this time, could I please have roll call?
Goodman,
Yes.
Nicholson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Carrington.
Excuse me.
Yes.
4 yeas, no nays.
Thank you. Is there any amendments to the agenda today? Hearing none, can I get a motion and a second for approval?
So moved.
Approved. I'm sorry. Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Nicholson, second by Councilman Parker, that we approve today's agenda. Hearing no discussion, can we have roll call, please?
Nicholson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Carrington,
Yes.
Goodman.
Yes.
4 yeas, no nays.
Thank you, Clerk Doyle. Good afternoon. It's a good day. It's a beautiful day. I know it's been a long week. We definitely had a lot of meetings the past week and a half. So I thank everyone that continues to be here. We have on the agenda today 50 District Court, City Council budget, and City Clerk budget. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to the mayor, and we can go over the 50 District Court budget.
Well, thank you so much, President Pro Tem Carrington. I'd like to invite Lynette, the 50th District Court Administrator, to join us and present the budget for the 50th District Court and answer any questions that folks have. Thank you so much for being here, by the way, Lynette. Really appreciate your service and leadership at the court.
Thank you. I was going to say thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Mayor.
I'm not a pastor. There's only one pastor.
I know.
Councilman Parker.
Good afternoon. First and foremost, thank you for taking this time to consider the budget that's been proposed for the operation of 50th District Court. As you may know, the District Court is known as the People's Court. We are here specifically to address the needs of the citizens of the city of Pontiac. We engage in resolving disputes fairly, equitably, and as efficiently as possible. I believe that that is reflected in our budget. What we're looking at, just a couple of things that we're looking at in our budget. One of the most important things is the people power. We have found that although COVID has done its business all over everywhere, we suffered quite a bit during the COVID, during the high days of COVID, which it looks like we're returning to, in that we had to very quickly adapt to a situation that none of us had any experience in. And thankfully, due to the people that we had and the resources that we had, we were able to make court services available to people in ways that it's never been done before. That puts an emphasis on technology. I think even recently, during this budget year, there has been an upgrade in the firewall for the court and I believe City Hall. And that was absolutely necessary in order for us to keep the lean access that we have. And that's the database that gives us all the criminal information and so forth. So definitely, that was a significant upgrade. Everybody went to laptops. We employ Zoom extensively, and that has been a surprising benefit to the public. Nobody wants to come to court. If you come to court, it's normally something wrong. And having people who have issues that are not of one that is tremendously horrible, such as beating someone to death or those type of things, being able to sit in your own home, sit in your car, and handle court obligations has shown us that people show up more than they used to when we had court open. Right now, we're still closed to the public, and part of what our budget wants to address is the fact that we have a handful of people. The truth of the matter is a court could operate with just a judge and clerks. Once they make their decisions, it has to be recorded and acted upon in a certain way. We have, in the last year and a half, hired and lost 11 clerks. The biggest reason has been the pay rate. I can't say much about our negotiations now, but we are working with the union to bring our clerks' pay in line with the market. For instance, our starting pay rate is on the contract is $14.70. We never start anyone there, consistent with the city's $15 minimum. The next step up is $15.51. So we start people at that. Back in the day, a long time ago, that might have been sufficient. Now we have so much more increased technology. The clerks have to be smarter, they have to be faster, they have to learn laws that they never had to learn before. So we've upgraded the requirements, but we have not kept in pace with the pay to the workforce. And to give you an example of how detrimental this is, down the street a ways, there's the Troy Court, 52, I can't remember which division. Our clerks will start here at $15.51. They can go down the street and start at $16.96. It's not that big of a drive. And we have found that to be consistently the case as we speak about other courts that are relatively close to us, that people might just say, hey, I can spend 5 more minutes on the road and get $1.50 more than I'm getting now. So that is one of the critical elements that our budget is trying to address. We also want to make as much use of technology as possible. Again, Zoom has been a roaring success, but there are other things that we can do that will enhance the service that the court gives to the public. There is a program that we're looking at that will automatically send out notifications to defendants as a reminder of your court date. A lot of us have this with especially with our doctors. They'll send a recorded message or a text message, and hey, I forgot all about that. Well, now you've got that reminder. We have transitioned our probation department into almost strictly Zoom. because we're not letting people in the court, and we still are not letting people come into the courthouse unless it is an in-person examination or an in-person hearing. So a defendant can demand to have their hearing in person, and we will do that. But because right now we have maybe 6 clerks, and none of them have ever worked in the court when we have had everything wide open, people walking in, they're tending to the phones, the public at the counter, as well as moving the paper that has to be moved to make sure that we ensure people's rights. Again, we've lost 11. This is a lot of training, a lot of effort that goes into getting these people. So to lose them because we can't quite come up to par with really what the market is showing is something that we really, really want to address. We are talking about starting to let people in the court in the middle of June. We have jury trials scheduled. We haven't had jury trials held in several years. But again, we're talking about a measured approach where we are letting certain class of people in because they are there for a certain type of hearing.
Just for the record, Clerk Doyle, President McGinnis is here. President voting at 3:14.
One of the things that people ask a lot is, what happens with all the money the court makes? First and foremost, courts don't make money. We enforce financial obligations that the court levies on people. Once we collect that money, then it goes in a ton of different places. For instance, if you were to file a landlord-tenant case and the money amount in controversy was, say, $1,750, up to $1,750, only $17 of the filing fee, which would be $45, would come to the city. The rest of it would go to a state-mandated purpose. So while we collect, we don't retain. Courts are funded the same way as the other divisions of the government by taxpayers. The beauty in the court is because we do take in for financial sanctions, filing fees, and so forth, we're able to lessen our impact on the total amount for the city. The other factor, and just to not harp on that factor, but to emphasize that factor, and this is also why we need more clerks. When you look at a court, you have to look at its caseload. What kind of cases come to that court? We're in the city of Pontiac. We have a very high crime rate compared to sister cities. So the cases that we get, they're not money cases. I took a quick look at some other third-class district courts, which is what we are in the area. And only 45% of our cases are cases that, well, actually 45% of our cases are the cases that don't bring in any money. They're felonies, they're misdemeanors, those type of things. Other courts that have a similar caseload to us, those type of cases make up 5%, 14%, 20%. So the other 80% of their cases are cases that bring in money. They're parking tickets. They're civil infractions. And that's the disadvantage that we have to live with. We don't have that kind of money incoming. We want to make sure that we keep the court up technologically, keep it up physically. As a matter of fact, I'll say this and I'll let it go. My Judge Walker is very conscientious of the appearance of the court. We all are. She rode by this weekend and took some pictures, and they're showing that it looks like Weed City. The grass is tall. And then she came and took some of City Hall, which is drastically different. Over the years, we have had to urge to have the court building taken care of the way other city buildings are taken care of. In closing, we have weathered a tremendous storm. We have suffered some setbacks. We have also made historic leaps. The method that we now use for landlord-tenant cases, we send it through mediation. All of it's online until it becomes a trial, then it comes to the judge. But it's such a good system that courts all over the state are looking to our model to set their systems up like it. So out of the flames comes some birds. So that's what we're looking at.
I want to recognize that Councilwoman Kathleen James was present voting at 3:16 p.m. President Pro Tem Carrington, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, President McGinnis. Mayor Grimal, I was trying to find an employee chart, organizational chart for the 50th District Court.
There probably isn't one. I don't think we've updated the chart.
She mentioned a lot
Recently.
of positions, so I just kind of want to verify
Right.
what's going on
And
at
that's
the court.
generally not something we would maintain here at City Hall. The district courts have a lot of autonomy in terms of their own operations. That's true throughout the state. Some of the courts referenced by Ms. Ward are administered by the county. That's true of the 52nd District Court and its 4 divisions here in the county. And I can't speak to the administrative relationship, but well, I can't. I could touch on it based on my time as a county commissioner, but I can't touch on exactly what the nature of the relationship is between the county and the courts that it's the funding unit for. But in terms of district courts where cities are the funding unit for them, we provide the funding, but really beyond that, everything is up to the district court and its administrator and chief judge. And so they conduct their own labor negotiations, unlike City Hall. The 50th District Court does have a union, the Michigan Association of Professional Employees, and they being the court administration is responsible for administering the courts, hiring, firing, all of that. So if they don't have a organizational chart, I can tell you that I don't have an organizational chart either. But Ms. Ward, you maybe, if you don't have an organizational chart, do you perhaps have a listing of positions that you could share with the council? If not today, maybe in the coming days?
Yes, I can get that information to you. Let me just give you an example. Right now, I think we have 2, 3, 4, maybe 6 clerks.
Okay.
And
So
we-
how many positions are in the budget? That's why I'm trying to, you stated that,
I believe it's 39.
okay.
It's either 36 or 39. I don't have
For
the
district-
number
for
with me, but
district court?
it's one of those.
Okay,
Yes.
so could you email us
Yes.
a list of your positions?
Yes.
Councilman Nicholson.
I have a few questions. I see in the totality of the funds, we're returning $90,000 to the fund balance than from where we started. And these questions, I'm not sure what the process was in filling these out, so I'm not sure who to ask. But there are a couple of line items that I'm curious about. In the Department 136 of the District Court, I noticed that there are no building maintenance. Oh, you know what? Actually, it's in 276. no, it's 136. It's the services building maintenance. We started last year with a budget of 26,000. This year, there's nothing in there. Is that because accounts are moving, or where those are going to be charged to is different? I can't imagine with the reality that we need to keep up the building in a different way, that we're not going to have any expenses related to the building's maintenance.
I'm sorry, could you give me that line?
Yeah, it's on page 2 of 3, about middle way down. It's account 276-136-931, services building maintenance.
We don't.
I'm curious about,
I'm trying to
in
remember.
that same vein, I don't see fees for, it looks like snow removal is not in here. It looks like there's money last year, but not this year. I don't see any line items for grass.
So I know with building services, those charges are that's an allocation charge, and it's based on head count. That's how we do the calculation. We didn't have the head count in order to include that calculation in the recommended. We'll be working with the court to get that information in.
Okay, so we're reviewing. I'm just. This is a continuing concern. It seems that we're reviewing preliminary budgets, and that's where I'm. That there's $90,000 different. That the beginning of the fund balance starts at 186 as of today, or maybe April, end of April, and that we're with this projected budget, the fund balance will be 276 for a difference of $90,000. Are we expecting to dip below 90,000 or come out
we
even?
really
or?
don't, because the court is funded through the general fund. We don't maintain a fund balance with this fund the same way, because it's essentially an operational fund. So we're not generally projecting a fund balance as we would general fund or road fund or capital improvement fund.
So where's this what's this $186,000?
It's just essentially the net revenues over the net expenses at this time, but we don't try and fund any type of ongoing fund balance, because the court is going to be funded via subsidy directly from the general
So
fund.
then, if it's the balance at this time, then the activity through 4/30 says $107. Isn't that as of this time?
Correct. Yes.
So what is the $186,000?
So that's just going to be the based on the numbers that are currently in there. They're not the final numbers. That's just showing based on the numbers that we have in here, subject to the final year to date numbers.
Then what's the difference between the 186 and the 276?
So the 186 is that is the net revenues over the expenses, just based on the recommended budget at this time. When we have the final numbers that are approved, is going to be based. We're going to set the subsidy coming from the general fund to make sure that there's no overspending being set in that account, being set in the fund.
I can't.
I share the councilman's concerns
Doesn't
and
make any
questions, Mr. Carrington. So going back, I heard you say that you don't have a personnel count to fill in that blank, and that may have been true when we submitted the budget, but that was now over 3 weeks ago. So what's the delay in getting that number so that we can allocate a specific budget number for services building maintenance?
I just didn't. Had not gotten an update. I didn't use last year's count. I know that there was an increase in head count that was budgeted, and I didn't use last year's head count for that allocation this year, and I just had not gotten an update on that number.
Okay, please, as we move forward, go through all of the budget items that were submitted to council at the beginning of this month, where you did not allocate a number as should have occurred, and make sure that beginning tomorrow you update all of those information
Will do.
items and get the updated budgets to council, because we can't continue to go through a budget process without having that updated information in the packets that council is reviewing. So make sure to update all of those outstanding items tomorrow and get it to council. And if for some reason there are some items that you're not in a position to update yet, please inform council of those items and when you anticipate that you will be able to provide those updates to council. Regarding
Mayor Grimo, I just want to confirm with you, we may want to essentially book them as an amendment to the budget, because we have the budget proposal as submitted by the date, and we'll want to amend the budget with helpful additional further information rather than just sort of have another draft, if you will. We'll want to make changes based on amendments that we'll consider June 8th and 9th.
Well, this is a proposal. This is a proposed budget that
Okay.
hasn't yet been adopted. And so I understand what you're saying, and I agree with that, but rather, this hasn't yet been adopted. And so we should incorporate this updated information in the budget when it's adopted by council, as opposed to adopting an incomplete budget and then amending that budget.
Legislative Council Sharp?
Yeah, just to shed some light on that. That's why on June the 8th, it's focused on proposed amendments, and that's your time to rectify and put in those numbers and agree to some different figures and vote on your budget.
Okay, I just want to make sure we don't have these we're reviewing a budget and then we're going to have another sort of set which we hadn't reviewed. I hear what you're saying. It's not technically an amendment that we have to do in the move in a second and that kind of song and dance, but so that we're looking at it sort of comprehensively of all the updates that will be made.
But
I agree.
And I'm open about what format that
Yes.
works.
Yeah,
Now
I agree with that. I just want to make sure that that information is given to council sooner rather than later, so that you can get that information, again, as soon as possible this week, and then have opportunities to ask questions about that information before you actually start looking at amendments or changes to the executive's proposed budget.
Got it. And I cut you off. You were about to give an answer, but then Nicholson still has the floor. Then we've got Parker, Goodman.
Well, I wasn't actually going to give an answer. I was going to echo Councilman Nicholson's question, which is, I'm not sure. I don't understand what these numbers represent either.
Okay, so let me try again here. With the fund balance, we essentially are trying to, because there's a large subsidy coming in from the general fund, we generally don't have a final number of that. We take an estimate with the mayor's recommended budget. If you look at the adopted budget or the amended budget for 2021-22, you see we're pretty close to zero, meaning that we're not trying to send any more money than what's needed. We put in a number for the transfer in, and you see that on in account 276-966-699.101. We put in an estimate of $2.3 million, fairly close to what we had last year. As we go through the budget process and we have a better sense of what the adopted numbers are going to be, we will be adjusting those numbers on the transfer in. But for purposes of the general fund, we need to have some estimate on what we think the transfer into the court coming out of the general fund is going to be. Right now, that's where you see the fund balance being created. But operationally speaking, we're not, there's no objective to create any fund balance, because any fund balance that's created is simply money coming out of the general fund and money that will be sitting in the court's fund balance. And there's no purpose in doing that.
Okay, so my request then is not to provide that information in the future, because it's very confusing.
Okay.
I think under each fund balance, it's not confusing. When we look at just 277 by itself, we've got a beginning, the beginning fund balance, the end of the fund balance, but it still makes a perception that there was something we started with and there's something we're ending with. I've had that assumption this entire process, so now I'm sort of feeling like I need to start over because a lot of things aren't going to make sense to me anymore. Is that the case in other
Well,
departments?
the court fund is again, it's a little bit different than, let's say, the road funds, because those are standalone funds that have their own funding sources that don't require anything from the general fund. So we do maintain a fund balance policy with that fund. Again, the court is a pretty unique situation where we're trying to determine exactly how much money is going to be needed out of the general fund, so that we can provide the funding that it needs without providing, there's no fund balance or objective in terms of trying to have excess funding coming out of the general fund simply residing in the court's fund balance.
Okay, I'm gonna put that aside and let administration deal with the overall questions. I'm gonna stick to just line items. As salaries and wages in each category, I'm seeing about a 7% raise. Does that depict new positions too? Do you have some ideas for new roles that are incorporated into salary and wages?
That does include all positions.
Is there a standard cost of living increase? So we're looking at new positions plus maybe like a COLA that you're anticipating from the union?
Not a COLA,
Uh-huh.
but they're looking at an across-the-board increase.
Okay. Okay. And so you're anticipating what those increases will be with these numbers that were provided?
At this point, I think it would interfere with the negotiations.
Okay.
If I put a number out there.
Sure. So this is essentially the new positions plus last year's numbers?
Yes.
Okay, so we should see, as that negotiation has changed, we should likely see an amendment coming our way.
Yes.
Okay. The technology improvements that you mentioned, are those budgeted for?
Yes, they are.
Can you tell me what line item that's in? I'm just having a hard
I'm
time
having
sifting
trouble
through it.
seeing here.
Yeah, they're little. It is little. I see computer equipment, but I assume that's probably a software expense. I can't find it in any of the accounts. That's why I just want to make sure it's there for you.
If I may, if I may.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know the account number in district court down at 276-136-731.003. There's computer equipment.
Nothing's budgeted in that
And
line
nothing
item
is
this
budgeted
year.
there at all.
But on the
Yeah.
next page, there's 276-136-977.011 computer equipment. 25,000 was pegged for this year.
Right.
A fraction of that has been used. 30,000 was requested, and 30,000 is budgeted for computer equipment. Does that seem the more likely price range that you'd be anticipating?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
our equipment is starting to age,
Can you read that
and
account
as
number?
it ages, we replace it.
Page 3 of 3? 2 of 3.
So,
So, looks like they
if I may,
budgeted it, might not-
while they're conferring.
I don't see
Yes, go ahead.
Am I-
Uh,
oh, okay.
Ms. Lynette, while they're conferring. In the line item, as the president mentioned, in the line item on page one of 3, there's nothing budgeted in the 25 that is budgeted, which goes up to 30,000. Do you expect any changes in those numbers as you move forward, based on some of the conversations you've already had? Well, the first page 1 was 731003. 276-136-731-003. You was budgeted for 5,200, and there's nothing for this year
Computer equipment.
in the
There's,
computer.
yeah, there's several computer equipment categories under the same account number.
Some of those, I think that some of those items were smaller items that we got, such as we outfitted all the clerks with headphones. And in my mind, it should have been in supplies, but the person that books our actions, our books our purchases, finally got that out, may have put it in the wrong account.
Okay.
I did have additional questions.
And
Anything further, Councilman
yes,
Parker?
sir.
Okay.
Back up to account number 276-00617, and
the account right below that, you have miscellaneous fees, which was amended budgeted this year at 31, that goes down to 20,000. Is that you in a,
Some of those miscellaneous fees, we get money back from the state for drunk driving cases. So if we have lower drunk driving cases, we have less coming back from the state. That is the same situation with our jury. When we have a jury, while we pay a certain amount, the state comes in and sends back a certain amount. So that would be the case for that particular account.
okay. And just because it doesn't seem like COVID is going anywhere,
Yeah.
there doesn't seem to be any money budgeted for COVID salaries.
That was not a line item that we participated in. It was added to there by the prior administration. So I know at one point I was requested to provide information that showed activities specifically related to COVID that some of our employees may have participated in, and I did send that information over. So that might have shown up there back then when that happened. I'm not sure why it's still up here. I don't know if that money is available, where it was coming from or not.
Okay. And then my last question. If I go to the MDIC grant monies, it goes down about $80,000. Are you expecting?
I can answer that one really quick.
Okay.
We don't do MIDC.
Okay.
That is actually our Indigent Defense
Right.
Fund, and Ashley is over that.
Okay. But I know at one of our meetings that she did explain that piece, but I also noted that there's a $80,000 difference. Is there a way we can get a hold of her to ask her if that's the expectation that the grant's gonna either cease or go down in the value?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
We work closely with them,
Okay.
but
But
yes,
it just seemed like a lot of money to be losing if you're losing it.
yeah.
Councilman Nicholson for the balance of your question.
Thank you. In a previous 50th District Court subcommittee meeting we briefly discussed Blight Court and referrals from the Blight Court to the 50th District Court. I think all of our microphones are going in and out.
Yeah,
I
I
wanna-
think at the podium the microphones are as well. So, Mr.
Oh.
Brown, if you hear us, we're having inconsistent audio functions.
Thank you.
Councilman Nicholson.
I want to make sure, especially as we step up code enforcement in our meeting, I don't know what day it is. In one of our previous meetings, we talked about expanding at the city, the code enforcement division. More code enforcement officers breeds more tickets, means that those accounts will start to reach that threshold. And I'm still looking for a direct answer from administration. I don't know, Mayor, if you are aware that I was looking for this. I dealt directly with the departments about what that dollar threshold is. Some people have, and the variety of answers go from $500 to $10,000. It seems that no one's really clear on when that referral happens.
From
Blight Court to the 50th District Court. Now, in that subcommittee meeting, the chief judge and Tammy from Code Enforcement were talking about. Tammy was saying, "Are you ready for these referrals? Because we've got a lot that are going to be coming your way." And she sort of said, "We'll do whatever we have to do. We'll figure it out." I want to make sure that your budget and that you guys are anticipating. I don't always know whether or not we're communicating to you guys saying, "Hey, we're really going to be stepping up these efforts," which likely will mean more referrals to the court. Is there with those sorts of tickets and that style of hearing, do you anticipate needing additional administrative resources above and beyond what you've requested?
I don't anticipate it.
Okay.
And one of the reasons that it was a little more expensive is that sometimes when the cases were presented to the judge, there was information that the judge needed that was not there or not easy to come by.
Mm-hmm.
So they would adjourn it and have another hearing. I believe Judge Walker sent out a memorandum that kind of laid out exactly how to do these cases in front of them.
Yeah.
And I think that should help a lot.
Okay.
Even with the influx of new ones.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilman Goodman, then Pro Tem Carrington.
I withdraw.
Pro Tem Carrington.
Well, just a quick, this is for Mr. Carrington. So it's a lot of gaps, and then so you plan on actually getting us those numbers. I don't want to ask the same question over and over, so I was just wondering, are you gonna go through this document and kind of give us some projections?
For sure. So,
Okay.
you know, with as the mayor pointed out, where we need to get information in, we certainly will get those numbers inputted as we move towards the adopted budget. So we have complete and update numbers for council as we move towards the adopted budget through this process.
All right, thank you, sir.
Others that wish to have the floor. Legislative Council Sharp, then Mayor Grimal.
Ms. Ward, just to go back, I know you mentioned about the judge having issue with the lawn maintenance. And I noticed in the budget, there is nothing in here for contractual mowing.
We don't normally budget that. That number usually comes from the city. I believe we're part of a contract that they negotiate with the vendor.
That's right. Yeah. So we, and by we I mean the city as a whole, takes care of the grass at the 50th District Court, just as we do parks, just as we do the City Hall property here. And so we're looking to make sure that just as we're doing more frequent mowing in our parks, we're going to be doing more frequent mowings at District Court and City Hall. So as we transition to bringing those mowing services in-house, not in time for this summer, but beginning in spring of 2023, we would be doing the lawn mowing at the 50th District Court facility in-house as well.
So in terms of this summer, have we included 50th District in terms of increasing the amount of cuts and the increased cost?
It's a little unclear to me. I was actually texting here with DPW about that very issue. Let's see here. Yes. So, yes, it is going to be cut on the same schedule as City Hall will be this year.
Okay.
That's right.
So there are no additional funds that would be needed to cover the increased amount? for
Well,
50th District?
the amounts here are chargebacks to the court, and I'll defer to Mr. Carrington in terms of how that is actually accounted for. It's not a situation, I don't think, where there's literally a money transfer, but Mr. Carrington, I'll defer to you in terms of the actual accounting for those services in the budget.
So yeah, so we do we do recoup those costs via an allocation. So some of that is going to be in trying to find our account. Part of it is going to be through the maintenance wages, as well as it's part of the building services. We through those two allocations how we track and recoup those costs from DPW, from the court back to DPW.
Okay.
But I think the question is, are we increasing that amount accordingly? Or perhaps that's not reflected on here, is I think what Ms. Sharp is asking.
Well, to the extent that we have more employees within DPW, we're
right,
seeing
but that won't be the case for this season. In other words, it'll be the case for spring of 2023 when it comes to mowing in-house, but it will not be the case for this current mowing season. And this current mowing season, although we continue to use the outside contractor, we are doing more frequent mowings for this current
Correct.
season
For this
than
summer, for
that's
this
right,
calendar
this-
year.
for
Yes.
well, this calendar year, that's
Yeah.
right. And so I believe Ms. Sharp is asking, since we're doing more mowings contractually this calendar year than we've done contractually in previous calendar years, is that accounted for here?
Yeah, so that would be accounted for because when the mowing is done by DPW, they do specify where those cuts are being done, and we're able to track and allocate those on a direct basis, in addition to any labor allocation that we do.
But obviously, in the past, because now we're gonna go forward and do increased, right? Because of the fact that there is a need for the increased cuts, and 50th District obviously has been falling behind along with the parks because they haven't had the increased cuts yet. So that's why I'm asking the question going forward, is their cost going to be included in that? Because they have not obviously been in line with City Hall. They've been in line with the park.
Okay, yeah, in terms of the specifics on the cuts, I would have to check with the department on, in terms of the exact numbers. But again, I know that they do track all of those that are being done for the parks and for court, because we essentially bill those to the departments. But I'll check and see in terms of the estimates and any increases for this calendar year that making sure we have captured those.
Because it sounds like there's going to be an increase. And then my last question is just about the contractual janitorial services. I know the city has a company that we contract with, but I see that there is no amount in the budget for their janitorial services. Just wondering why that is.
Yeah, so again, because we haven't seen any activity, we've been trying to track that figure because there was no activity. Not sure if that's being billed. If we're capturing that, we did not include anything just based on no activity that had shown up for this current fiscal year. We hadn't shown any activity in that account for the current fiscal year.
So the building hasn't been cleaned at all?
We have not. We just hadn't shown. That particular account had not shown any activity.
How is that activity tracked? Obviously, there's been some cleaning services conducted there. Now, I don't know how that's organized at 50th District Court. I don't know if that's done by employees of the court or if that's outsourced services. But I think Ms. Sharp is saying, presuming that there's been activity actually occurring in the building, why isn't there financial activity showing in the balance sheet?
Yeah, well, unless the only explanation would be if it's being placed into a different general ledger account. But for that particular account, there was no activity that I was able to find for that.
Okay, so who would know if it's being placed in a different general ledger account?
I would get that information from DPW.
Okay.
Because we certainly, in terms of putting together the year-to-date activity and the projections, we've been trying to track that. But that's something we can work with DPW on.
So I do have an answer to Councilman Nicholson's earlier question about the jurisdictional limit for blight court. And I wasn't aware that you were trying to get an answer to that question until you brought it up here at the council meeting. But the answer is that the maximum fine amount per day that is issued by the city is $500, as you probably know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Your question is how big of fines can the blight court handle? The jurisdictional limit for the blight court is $10,000, as you seem to surmise, and under. There's not an aggregate limit per property, so it's not like, if we've had cases, Maynard Court being one, for example, where we've been in front of blight court in amounts in excess of $10,000 in aggregate. And so there really, although there's a limit in terms of per fine jurisdictionally of $10,000, that doesn't really come into play because each individual fine that we issue it's often a per day fine of $500, but it's still, each fine is $500. So given that the jurisdictional limit for each fine is $10,000 and under in Blight Court, there really is no jurisdictional limit restriction, given that the most any one fine we issue is in the amount of $500, if that makes sense.
So what would the 50th District Court be hearing from as far as referrals from the Blight Court?
I'm a little unclear on that,
Yeah.
but I think it would probably come down to collection matters in terms of actually trying to enforce collection. So we have this judgment from Blight Court, and if the property owner is just refusing to pay, then we would go to 50th District Court to try to enforce the judgment. And the jurisdictional limit of the 50th District Court, like any district court in the state, I believe is still $25,000. And so if it's under $25,000, it would be something we could go and try to enforce collection mechanisms on in district court. If it's above that amount, we would presumably have to go to circuit court. But I can have the city's attorney follow up with you and have a more in-depth conversation about that if you
Thank
like.
you.
I think the Law and the Court Subcommittee would benefit from that information.
That'd be great. Yeah, we can facilitate that.
Yep.
Councilman Parker?
Yeah, because along that same lines, Ms. Lynn, if I recall one of the meetings we had, I thought that once we dealt with Black Court and we got to that amount and they failed to pay, and maybe I just misheard it or misplaced it in my head. I thought part of that went to their tax lien.
I don't know. We don't deal with placing liens. For instance, if the judges, if somebody fails to pay something, our only recourse is what is permitted by statute. And nothing in the statutes allows the court to put a lien on any property. Individuals can do that, but if two people came into court, had a dispute, one won $10,000, they can access the court to try to determine how to get payment, such as they would have an examination, what we call a creditor's exam, to find out where property is of the defendant. But then they would ask the court for a lien. But other than that, for something that's owed directly to the court, we don't do any liens.
And again, I just remember hearing it at one of our meetings that when we were talking about how do we put some teeth into the people actually paying, that it rolled over somewhere and it became a part of their tax burden for the year. But I could have just miscatalogued it in my head, so I'll investigate as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is your district court building cleaned? Have you detected work that cleans it? Or is that?
Yes, it's being cleaned.
Okay.
We have a janitor that reports daily.
Okay. And what would you say, on behalf of the employees of the district court, are the biggest frustration with the physical limitations of the building?
There was a lot of money invested in the heating and cooling system. My understanding is there was a module that could have been purchased that would help us to control different zones of the court. That module, it was decided not to purchase that module. You may go upstairs to a judge's courtroom and it's 80 degrees up there. Come downstairs into my office and it's 55. We have no control over what the temperatures are, when. That's very frustrating, especially.
And that's after the HVAC work and upgrades have been done?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that is a big frustration with the facility. The regularity of the grounds being properly maintained is absolutely a source of frustration. I did a study a couple of years ago when we were having people come into the building. For a month, the average amount was about 300 people. So when people come into the court, City of Pontiac, they're looking at us, the court, as a representative of the City of Pontiac. So it's terribly embarrassing to the chief judge when she drives by and there's debris all over the place, grass is not cut, dandelions way up here. And I was told once that, you know, if you want to, your employees are more apt to feel good about their workplace if it's maintained. And we have some deficiencies there. I'm not trying to point any fingers or anything.
No, I
This
mean,
is
all the mayor and all 7 council members, this is our first budget session. We're in our first few months. We all individually have interactions as citizens, you know, exterior or interior with the facility, but it's very helpful for us to get a working sense. And I know that that's been shared with law in the courts, but we're just trying to amplify that for the full council's consideration in terms of resource decisions.
the heating and cooling is absolutely a problem. We just have, it's a hit and miss day. A hit and miss day.
How long have you been an employee with the court?
I have been with the court since 2009.
And if, obviously, temperature control will likely be an answer for this, but setting that aside as well, for the visitors, for the citizens that are utilizing this municipal facility, what are the frequent feedback or frustrations or welcome feedback that you receive about the facilities, the physical space?
When they did the HVAC, also the bathrooms upstairs were redone. So that's a very nice facility. Upstairs is probably in better condition than anywhere else, and that's where all the courtrooms are. A few years before HVAC, there was a big leak in the building, and we had to replace the floor on the second floor. So it is all tile. Downstairs is carpet, and it's old. We were able to, actually, one of the council people in the last council took a special interest in the appearance of the court. And we were able to get the clerk's area recarpeted. The main area where people will be is it's old carpet. We need to change that.
And in terms of customer service or interaction, not thinking about the physical limitations or benefits to the space, what are the frequent feedback or frustrations you hear from citizens and residents about the operations of the district court?
Getting through, by the telephone especially.
Okay.
It's a multifaceted problem. One is we never have enough people to do the paperwork, which is extensive, answer the phones, and problem shoot. We've tossed around several ideas, but you have to have a certain bit of knowledge when someone calls in order to be able to just handle. If somebody says, when is my court date? We've got a computer that can be easily done. Some of the questions aren't that straightforward, so it's a little more difficult to say, let's get an answering service. Right now, it's extremely frustrating because we just don't have the people. I think we have maybe 6 clerks, and we should have about 12. So they're doing, and it's really important to me that the employees are able to do the paperwork, because if they don't, somebody could wind up in jail when they shouldn't be. And that is a prime concern. We want to make sure that all the paperwork is always right. So they spend a lot of time, and in criminal cases, they're back and forth, so they handle those cases a lot. We're trying to brainstorm as to what we can do with the telephones. We had looked into getting like the bots, where if somebody gets online and tries to reach the court, we do have access online also. But because the phones are not able to be answered, then the mailbox gets full. But if we could have we were looking at having a system where we had a bot that would at least come up and greet a person and say, what is your problem today? Get the information and then try to confer it to someone that could handle it. Like I said, we've been brainstorming, but access to the court is paramount. It is what it's all about. And if we can't provide access in person, we definitely have to shore up the other areas where we provide access.
Councilman Nicholson, then Mayor Grimel.
When do you anticipate union negotiations to be in a place where you'll have some good insight?
The contract expires on June 30th, so I expect
Perfect timing. Okay.
so I expect that we should have something before then.
Okay.
Mayor Grimel.
Yeah, I just wanted to address a few of the questions that have been asked in regard to Councilman Parker's question, and this ties into Councilman Nicholson's question as well. Although the city can go to 50th District Court to pursue certain collection procedures against those who have not paid blight court judgments. For example, if we wanted to garner somebody's wages or something like that, that is an avenue that's open. As a practical matter, it's very unlikely we would pursue those avenues, because what will happen is that City Council has the authority to put any unpaid blight court judgments on the tax rolls. And so it's City Council that would vote to put those on the tax rolls. That does not require us going to 50th District Court to do so. So that's how these things end up on the tax rolls. And because of that, I'm not sure, who on staff you've been talking with, Councilman, but it's pretty unlikely that we would end up going to 50th District Court for the large majority of blight court matters. That's sort of the advantage, or is the advantage of blight court, is that we're able to get those judgments, it's my understanding, and then if folks don't pay those judgments, we can, through council action, put those judgment amounts on the tax rolls. In terms of the HVAC system at City Council, I think this goes back, the HVAC system at the District Court, this goes back a few years now when it was installed. But per John Ballant, who was the then city engineer and also at the same time, or some period of overlap, the DPW director, apparently it was proposed to the then City Council that they approve this zone modulator system so that they could better control temperature differentially throughout the building. And the council at the time, and I don't know the year, but the council at the time, per John Ballant, decided not to fund that item for the district court. Again, this is all per John Ballant. And again, I don't know how far back this goes. Do you have a sense of that, Ms. Ward?
It's been installed a couple of years now.
Okay. And then the final item I would say is, as we do a comprehensive capital needs assessment for city-owned property, I think it's pretty obvious that all city-owned property should be included in that, including the 50th District Court. And we already had started having some internal conversations about including the 50th District Court in that assessment. So I think, just as we've talked about City Hall, just as we've talked about possibly a city-owned DPW facility and city parks, we should certainly, and for that matter, fire stations and the sheriff's office or sheriff's substation next door here, we should include the 50th District Court in that analysis.
Legislative Council Sharp.
Just to clarify, Ms. Ward, I thought it was my understanding that you had communication with the last DPW director as it related to that module.
Correct.
And they did not, meaning the last administration did not go forward with getting that module.
That was the indication from him, yes.
Thank you. So, because you did have the quote or the figure in terms of the cost of that, but they did not go forward with executing and purchasing that module.
My understanding from the last DPW director is that the vendor who was doing the HVAC offered this module even at a discount. And I'm not sure which entity refused it, but it was refused.
Well, that's not what Ms. Ward's saying, just to be clear. Ms. Ward's saying she doesn't know who refused it. It's the view of John Ballant that it was City Council that refused it. I don't know the objective truth. I'm just saying John Ballant's view is that it was City Council that refused it.
What I'm saying is it was the last DPW director, which was when Mr. Ringo was here, that there was some traction with that item. Is
Okay,
what I'm saying.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Okay, so it may have gone back to the John Ballant years, but more recently you had some conversations with Mr. Ringo.
Correct.
And then do you know why it ultimately wasn't approved? Was it a Mr. Ringo decision or a previous mayor decision not to proceed, or was it a city council decision, or you're just not sure?
I was led to believe that it was not city council.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Okay.
Do we know what range of amount we're talking about?
At that point, I think the vendor was offering to add it in for $25,000,
It's helpful to know the range.
which
Thank
was
you.
a discount. I don't know
Right.
currently.
Councilman Nicholson?
I hate to bring it up again. The reason why I keep bringing it up is because I want to make sure you have what you need.
Thank you so much.
And and now that Judge Walker's here, maybe she can recall with me. We can brainstorm where we were at. And welcome. We in a 50th district, or in our 50th district court subcommittee meeting, at some point when Tammy Cooper joined us from code enforcement, we had a conversation, in-depth conversation about blight court. And at that point, we were already talking about limited resources at the court and leaves of absence and what we were doing with budgeting in the interim. During that conversation, Tammy Cooper asked, "Are you ready for some of these things that are going to start coming? Because we're got some things coming from blight court. They're going to be coming to the 50th district court. We're trying to work out what those things were, so that way we can also offer what administrative resources might you need to make that a reality."
All right, thank you. And my apologies for getting here so late. Tuesday is a heavy docket for us in the afternoon. But I was listening for at least the last 20 minutes on the conversation, and I totally concur with everything that Ms. Ward has indicated in terms of the frustrations and the feedback from staff and all of that. But to get directly to your question, in terms of our needs for handling an influx, we need bodies right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult for us to evaluate because of the staff that we have lost, to evaluate if we were fully staffed and if staff was fully trained, if we would have the ability to keep up with an influx of new matters from targeted enforcement.
So tell me more about what that enforcement entails. What are those cases? When are they coming from blight court to you? What sort of matters are you handling? In the
We have
50th?
not handled anything that has come from blight court so far.
What would they
because
be? What would you anticipate those items to be?
I would think that they might be more collection matters where there has been some type of assessment here
Okay. So
as a result of a blight court violation and then the person not doing what they were supposed to do. That would be my
Yeah,
thought.
there really shouldn't be any blight court matters other than maybe a handful of situations that are going to the district court. That's the whole point of
Yeah.
blight court. If we were going to take those matters to district court, we wouldn't have blight court. We'd just go straight to district court. So I guess, and I know I alluded to this earlier, I guess I'm not sure where the concern about this originated from.
It originated
but-
from that meeting, and there was a lot of like, "Oh, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle this?" So that's why I keep bringing it up, because I really
Well,
want to
I wasn't at the meeting, but the blight, when it comes to blight, what our city attorney has said is that city council can put those matters directly on the tax rolls. So if there's a need to do collection activity beyond putting it on the tax rolls, then yes, it would have to go to the 50th District Court, is my understanding. But if it's just a matter of putting it on the tax rolls, I don't think blight matters would have to go to 50th District Court. Now, when it comes to putting some other issues on the tax rolls, like, and I'm not saying we would necessarily do these things, but if it's, unpaid bills for demolishing structures, if it's unpaid water bills or something like that. Now, some of those things I think might require court judgments to put on the tax rolls, but Chief Judge, do you have some insights?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think we were talking about cases that would come from blight court. I think what we were talking about was increased enforcement from code enforcement on some of the municipal civil infractions that have the $100
There it is.
fine for the first
Okay,
offense.
good.
So 300
Forget
for the
about
second
all of the blight court stuff I've said this entire afternoon. That is exactly what I was looking for.
All right.
Okay, so
The municipal civil infractions carry a $100 fine first offense,
Right.
300 second offense, and third and subsequent 500. And the issue was that they could be cited per day.
Sure.
Once you
Right.
get to the third.
But the vast majority of those matters, if they deal with blight, are going to blight court, just to be clear. So, a lot of those matters are in fact being referred to blight court. So, we've had situations where a landlord is getting cited $500 a day, day after day after day after day, and we've had a cumulative for one landlord at one property of tens of thousands of dollars, again, many different citations before blight court. So I guess the question is, what sort of items do you envision going to 50th District Court instead of blight court when it comes to municipal civil infractions?
I'm just thinking, and I've not been, closely involved in blight court, so I'm not sure all what they are handling, but parking on front lawn, municipal civil infraction. I'm assuming those wouldn't necessarily?
That would probably be blight court.
Really? Okay. All right.
So I think this is an internal thing that we need to figure out what the process is, especially with council leadership. I want to make sure I have their attention.
What that means, but he wants their attention.
So it sounds like if I want to make sure that we understand the mechanism to make that happen. And what is the process by which, one, the blight court knows that maybe 50th District Court is not where they're going to be sending these things, because I think it's unclear from code enforcement, at least with Tammy during that conversation. It seems that she's under the impression that she will be referring some things over to the 50th District Court rather than being able to be handled between the blight court and the council. But I want to know, does council leadership, do we understand when that trigger happens? When we start to put things on the tax roll, who has to ask us to do that? Is that a resolution? Is that a motion? Is that?
Nothing in the last 5.5 months has been brought to council that would require that action.
Right.
And being an observer of the Pontiac City Council for the last 12 years, I can't recall ever seeing that on an agenda for council action.
Well, I think that's because blight court is new. So I don't know exactly when blight court was established, but this would be something that would happen probably once a year, twice a year
Councilman
at
Woodward
most.
was alive. Don Woodward was alive at the time, so that's a barometer of time.
Ms. Sharp, do you have a sense of when blight court started?
This has been 1 year, I think.
Yeah,
I don't think it
I think
took a
Councilman
minute for
Woodward
the-
was alive when blight court
up
actually
and
started
running.
operating. I think
He
he
was
may have been alive
instrumental.
when it was discussed,
Yes.
but I don't think he was alive when it started operating.
I think there's a great clarity here that more clarity is needed in terms of the many moving parts. The budget that we're considering with other departments should inherently result in greater code enforcement action. And so what we want to know is whatever that structure is that would then receive that higher volume, that it is equipped to do so. I mean, I look at each blight court docket, and if that's the only code enforcement action, then that's pretty small. So that tells me that I'm expecting a great deal more. And if it all goes through blight court, that's okay. We just want to know that concretely, because that is further clarity that this council would benefit from. So that way we just allocate the resources in the most appropriate way. and we don't unintentionally starve the resources from where it may ultimately end up. That's all. We just want to know that question on the front end versus the back end. When we find out 4 months into a fiscal year, we've really missed the mark, where we're opening the spigot more, but we didn't put out more buckets to catch that, the greater volume or flow from the open spigot.
Mr. President, if I may.
Councilman Parker.
If you recall good afternoon, always good to see you. If you recall when we started bringing the Blight Court to the Law Subcommittee, it was for that reason, so we could understand better what they were doing, what assistance we could offer them in regards to how they move forward, because at the time when we were talking with them, myself specifically, talking with Ms. Cooper, her issue was her frustration with people who are repeat offenders, and they kept coming back over and over and over again, and the money they get up to $500 or $1,000 or whatever, and it just did not seem to be a way that that it had any teeth. So, and we've only been dealing with this for a couple of months ourselves, is how do we get them some support so that as people come back, they know I either pay it or something drastic is going to happen to me, other than somebody just slap me on the hand and say it goes over here and we don't have to worry about it. That was how, when we got involved in, from a council perspective, that we got that as opposed to waiting to hear it, we would at least get a monthly report from Blight Court as to what their issues and concerns were, and see if we can place this full weight of the council behind it to get them somewhat resolved. That was where we brought it to.
Mayor Greimel.
I certainly agree that more clarity is needed. And I've been texting here while we've been having this, because the folks who really handle Blight Court are not with us today, obviously. Those people are largely from code enforcement, and I know reference has been made to Tammy Cooper, but also the city's attorney. And so I've been in touch with the city's attorney. All of the information I've been relaying is from the city's attorney. But I don't think Blight Court has been in existence all that long in terms of it actually operating. So I don't know exactly when it started, but I would be very surprised if it started while Councilman Woodward was still on council. Let me just say that.
I know it's been discussed for the last 4 years, so.
That's for sure. It was discussed for many years before it was implemented. And so I want to just sort of be clear about it is relatively new. To your point, Mr. President, I think you're right that there has not been enough code enforcement action. I mean, this has been a concern of ours. And I think part of that is that this is why we're calling for a restructuring of the organizational chart here at City Hall, but having code enforcement under the city planner, frankly, makes no sense at all, because the city planner is not somebody who is focused on policing blight. That's not a traditional job role for the city planner. And so we really do need to get folks out of these kind of strange silos that they've been placed in, and make sure that they're working with rental unit inspectors and people who are actually focused on this, rather than being under a division that's managed by somebody whose professional expertise is not in this area. We agree that we need to ramp up the number of tickets issued and actual enforcement. I think a lot of times there are conversations had with people about their blight. Sometimes there are some small ticket amounts that are issued, or fine amounts that are issued, that maybe are paid off. But we have not had the kind of aggressive enforcement when it comes to cracking down on blight that Pontiac's residents deserve. Our residents, the vast majority of whom take good care of their property, deserve to make sure that blight that's next door to them, or slum landlords that are not treating their tenants right, our residents deserve to have those bad actors dealt with appropriately and aggressively, to make sure that we're cracking down on slum landlords and cracking down on the small number of property owners that are responsible for the bulk of blight in the community. And so we agree with everything you're saying, but the Blight Court is designed, at least, to be the primary vehicle where these blight tickets go, precisely so that we can deal with these issues quickly without having to go through the 50th District Court, without having to burden the 50th District Court with additional costs and administrative expense. So we can certainly have a deeper dive on this topic. It's pretty clear that it's important that we do so. And I defer to your judgment about whether you'd like that to occur as part of the budget hearings, whether you'd like it to be at a full city council meeting, whether you'd like it to be in a subcommittee meeting in the law and courts. But whatever that venue is, we'll make sure that all of the experts in the area, including the city's attorney, are present to have a robust discussion about it.
Got it. Well received. Legislative Counsel Sharp?
Just one quick question. To go, just to piggyback off of what all of you have probably said already in terms of the enforcement piece, and maybe the finance director can speak to it, because just like with the code enforcement with lawn cutting, council is usually presented with a list of names and amounts in which to put on the tax rolls. So just to have that in conjunction with, maybe, I don't know what that timing looks like. So if you have that with blight court, then I would imagine that list should be drafted simultaneously with those others with the grass cutting, is what I'm saying. But I don't know how that works.
In the past, at least, prior to what might be the current configuration, how frequently would that come to council?
I believe it was just once a year.
Okay.
And I think the finance director can speak to that. I think it's just once a year.
Thank you, Judge Walker.
Yeah, so it is done once a year when we're preparing to roll those charges onto the property taxes. That's we get a list from the code enforcement and DPW and request that to be approved so that it can be placed on onto the property taxes.
All right. Thank you. Chief Judge Walker, I'm sorry to make you come up again, but we have done a budget amendment this fiscal year in terms of the information technology firewall upgrades. We have heard now in terms of the HVAC module, temperature control module is an outstanding need. You've shared about staffing challenges. Looking long range, can you share other sort of operational or tactical challenges down the road that you'd like us to have on the radar that might not be an immediate fiscal consideration, but could have future fiscal implications?
At this time, we're trying to evaluate, and it's difficult post-COVID, not post, we're still in COVID, but to evaluate what our needs are going to be in the building for enhanced technology. Right now, for example, when we are live streaming things, each one of the courtrooms has one camera that points out. So if we were at a point where we really needed to show a witness who's also testifying, you can't see them right now. You can see the outer courtroom. So maybe at some point down the road, a better system, better camera system inside the building, just not in the courtroom. And as I look long term at what the courts statewide are doing, they're going to be switching up and ramping up their e-filing. Right now, we are very much a paper court, which is one of the things that has us a little bit at a disadvantage because, especially in the civil division, there's a lot of paper. So over the next few years, and I don't know where we are on that progression, we will be at some point doing e-filing, which may require slightly different technology than what we have right now, because the judges will need to, instead of looking at a paper file, they're going to have to be looking on a screen at all the documents that are in the file, and maybe still using Zoom to look at the people on another one. So that may be down the road. But I think more technology, at some point evaluating whether we need a magistrate. We're still looking at case flows right now. We have not done it. Many of the other district courts in the county have magistrates doing their nighttime search warrants and, a lot of their arraignments and some other issues. We don't have that because of caseloads. The state has not done a recent caseload study. I suspect that they will, because I think the last one was done maybe 10 years ago. Or it was some time ago that caused us in the sequence to lose a judicial seat. They indicated that it would be through attrition, and that's why Judge Thomas's seat was not filled. I don't know what future caseloads will show, so that's something that we're going to be looking at down the road. We just can't react to it unless we know what the data shows, and we don't know that yet.
Thank you. Other questions for and feedback for Chief Judge Councilman Parker?
One more. Certainly in this season, it seems like mental health is moving closer and closer to the forefront. Have you seen an increase in caseload because of that? And if so,
I won't necessarily an increase in caseload numbers, but so many more cases are related to mental health services that are needed. And as a result of COVID, we've had to pay more attention to what that looks like, because you can't just house people in the jail that necessarily have mental health issues. But long term, is our court ripe for having a mental health treatment court? Of course. But that would require a whole different set of resources in terms of our probation department. So for right now, we're sharing resources with other courts if we identify people, whether they need veterans court, sobriety court, mental health court. We share with the other district courts that already have them in place. The only, I'd say, real negative impact to defendants is lack of transportation in getting there. But those are things that we're constantly looking at. We just don't have the resources. And I'm not saying we need them in advance, because unless there was a need for that, because there's a whole set of training that goes along with that, and then some state funding that you can get, some federal funding that you can get. But we're not there at this point.
thank you.
Councilwoman James?
Just out of curiosity, how expensive is it to implement a mental health court? How complicated is it, and how expensive is it to get one implemented?
There aren't that many. I think there's only one that I know of in Oakland County right now at the district court level. I can't remember if it's Oak Park or where. But you have to have probation staff. You have to have at least one judge that is dedicated to handling that docket, because it's much more hands-on. Many more in-person monitoring throughout the probationary process. And I can give you an example with Veterans Court in Waterford, where we have our chief probation officer participate in those. So that officer has to be present at all of those hearings. And I think they may be either every week or every other week. Plus the resources that it takes. You may need to have sponsors. You may have mentors who work along with the individuals, additional services that you bring in, mental health organizations who are involved. It requires a combined effort. There's quite a bit of state support and state training for the officers and all of those involved. So to answer you, the short answer is I don't know what the cost would be, but I know it takes a little more than what we have right now. We've just been a little limited in being able to look into it further. We have not done that.
Excellent question. Mayor Greimel?
I don't want to get too in the weeds when it comes to operational questions, since that's not really the purpose of the hearing. But I know a question was asked about COVID, and I've heard from a number of different perspectives concerns, not just about the 50th District Court, but about courts in general being closed as a result of COVID, which has made it difficult for in pro per individuals. It's made it difficult for, it made it a little more expensive apparently for the city in terms of our city attorneys, because I believe each judge has asked for a specific attorney to be assigned to their courtroom for purposes of Zoom calls, is what I've been told, as opposed to one attorney who can kind of courtroom hop in person. I know that some landlords have been concerned about delays in processing things too. So I've heard from just a lot of different perspectives, tenants, landlords, attorneys, concerns about it. I know that some courts are starting to reopen. I've heard it said that the 50th District Court is starting to reopen or has a plan scheduled to reopen. But I'm wondering if you can shed some light on those plans and where things stand in that regard.
Absolutely, and thanks for the question. I will be meeting with the landlords next week to talk about that, and there are a lot of concerns. I had a plan to reopen this month. As a result of the COVID numbers, the uptick and the fact that we lost so many staff in a short period of time, it did not make sense to reopen when a great number of our staff in the clerk's office because they're new, have not worked in an environment where they had to deal with not just the phones and things coming out of the courtroom, but also counter traffic. We were not equipped to deal with that. We are starting jury trials next in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Those will be in person. I
Those will
presume.
be in person.
Yeah.
So we have been trying to figure how we can bring this large jury pool, what room we can use that we can have them spaced, not necessarily 6 feet at this point, but certainly masked, all the protections in place, a room that's large enough to do voir dire, that initial questioning, to get them down to a smaller group where we can put them. So the juries are going to be our first test of bringing a lot of people in. We will not still be just wholesale open to the public. We've been trying to service people at the door as we can. We've been trying to provide as much information as we can. Our officers, we added a terminal. I don't know if you discussed it at the front door, where the court officers can look things up as well for people who are at the door. So we are going to see how the jury week goes. That's June 14th, 15th, 16th in that area. And then we'll be better equipped to decide when we're going to open. It's going to have to be a phased opening, and we have to decide what phased looks like. Do we allow everyone to come into the courtroom who wants to? I've already asked the judges, what do you feel comfortable with in your courtroom? I'm not going to allow every seat to be filled in my courtroom. And I have some high-profile cases coming up where I'm sure that they could all be filled. I don't think that's safe because of the type of cases that there are, because I expect there to be some retaliative moves. So we're going to phase it with public safety in mind, with getting people serviced in time, because that is a problem. I was looking at our forms. You know, we allow people to purchase court forms. Well, now we've been referring them to online, to the state website to get the forms. But some would benefit from some in-person guidance. We can refer them to legal aid. We can refer them to michiganlegalhelp.org, which kind of walks them through the process, and they have some fill-in-the-blank forms. But we're trying to do it in a way that's strategic, but yet not designed to frustrate people, because I don't want a large influx, and we're not prepared to deal with that. But we are working on it, but it will start for sure June 14th.
Councilman Nicholson.
Thank you.
Is the court currently working with staffing companies or outside staffing resources?
Not at this time. We have used them before for positions like the account clerk position. Have we used them for clerks, staffing agencies? Well, not staffing agencies. When we are looking to hire, we do post through Indeed and things like that, but not dealing with like temporary agencies. We have not done that in a while.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder about potentially considering that in other professional services just to more expressly meet the need. You know, they sometimes have pools of administrative people that are, you know, have, and they have databases that they can pull from to see who they've got right away. I know you're in a great deal of need administratively.
One of our issues is people who have JIS experience. And that's kind of a specialized area, so we'd be looking for people who have that.
Yeah. I mean, there are staffing agencies like Kelly Services that has an entire legal division that they can, source from and see if there are people that are looking, and keyword search in their databases and see what they have. And you could even call beforehand and say, hey, we don't want to sign a contract with you unless you can tell me you've got these types of people, and that could certainly be of some support. I'm just looking for any way that we can provide some support to get you back to where you want and need to be. Yeah. That's what I got.
Other discussion? Thank you, Chief Judge. Thank you, Ms. Ward. This has been very illuminating, and I thank you for your interaction with the Council's Law and the Court Subcommittee as we expand our familiarity with your challenges and opportunities as the City of Pontiac's Municipal Court.
Thank you for your consideration of all of our needs. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to make an executive decision here that will go to the clerk's presentation next, since he's got it keyed up, and in case that we run short on time, that we can then redetermine a time for the council budget on another day if we need to. So with that, Clerk Garland Doyle, you have the floor for the Office of City Clerk budget presentation.
Thank you, Mr. President. You should have two documents before you. One is the, which was a part of the agenda packet, the Office of the City Clerk 2021-22 year in review. It kind of talks about the accomplishments in the clerk's office over the past fiscal year. And you also have a copy of the budget presentation that I'm about to make now. Okay. The mission of the City Clerk's office is to perform duties as prescribed by federal, state, and as well as the city charter while providing outstanding customer service both to our internal and external customers. Most of our duties are really spelled out in the charter. They're listed there. I won't go through them. The Office of the City Clerk is divided into three divisions primarily: the Council Commission Division, the Elections Division, and the Marijuana Regulations Division. So as it relates to the Council Commission Division, the mission of that division is to provide administrative support both to the City Council and soon to the Charter Commission. As you know, the election was earlier this month. We elected 9 charter commissioners. Just for the public's benefit, the charter commissioners that were elected were Norbert Burrows, Gil Garrett, Brian Killian, Lucy Payne, Tamika Ramsey, Scott Stewart, Bruce Turpin, Kermit Williams, and Jose Yarborough III. So that according to state law, charter commissioners have up to 3 years to complete a charter revision. That must be approved by the voters before it can become effective. So each division, we try to have goals for each of our divisions. So the goals for the Council Commission Division are to ensure that agendas and approved minutes are posted timely on the city's website. As I stated before, we'll be providing administrative support to the Charter Commission. We plan to keep the public informed about the Charter Revision Commission process and to educate boards and commissions, and by that I'm talking about the advisory boards that the city and stuff has, as it relates to the Open Meetings Act and the Freedom of Information Act, and as well as to respond timely to FOIAs.
I do want to ask,
Sure.
do you have operationally all that you need for this division's goals for the coming fiscal year? Are we able to hit the marks on all those items, or are there some areas that need more help and attention? Are FOIA requests being able to be responded to in a timely manner, or is there a backlog?
The problem with FOIA requests are that we just serve as the FOIA coordinator. So by state law, we have 5 days to respond to a FOIA once we get it. We send out, most of the time, if we have the information, we can immediately respond. But a lot of the times, we need the information from a department. So we immediately send out the request to the department. We give them 4 days to respond. We send them a reminder on the 4th day that the response is due in order to be compliant with the 5 days. If they need additional time, they can request it and we can ask for an extension. By, again, state law, we can ask for a 10-day extension. But I won't say so much now, but previously, so many FOIAs just went unanswered. Just simply, a matter of fact, the city was sued at least on one occasion, maybe even more than one occasion, by just not responding to FOIA. And that was not on the clerk's office because we're constantly sending reminders, but the previous administration just was not responding to FOIA requests.
So are you keeping like a tally as the coordinator? No,
Yes.
But so do we have a remaining backlog of unresolved FOIA requests?
I believe all the FOIAs, the backlog, I believe have been in essence responded to, but I'll check with the deputy clerk who primarily oversees the FOIA process.
But so today versus 6 months ago, we're in a stronger position as a municipality.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And I can
Mayor Brimley, yes.
I can just say that when we came in, there was a giant stack of unresponded to FOIA requests that we sorted through, and I really appreciate the clerk's assistance and responsiveness and helping us kind of understand where those requests are, and we made sure that departments started responding to those requests, address that backlog. If there are any still outstanding requests, obviously let us know, clerk, because we want to make sure that we're responding in a timely way to the public.
Yes. And again, we appreciate that because I also should say the building department, Wade Trim, was really unresponsive as well to FOIAs too, but through the mayor's office and the deputy mayor, they addressed that issue. So now FOIAs are being responded to timely. Because again, the city can be sued and was previously sued for that.
I'd like to recognize Councilman Rutherford as present voting at 4:43 p.m. Please proceed.
So here is, you have the budget in your binders. The city clerk general, and that's the clerk's office itself. There's a small increase in our budget of a little over 8%, and that's primarily due to we've added a customer service representative position in our budget. We had a part-time person who was kind of working full-time, but actually will be able to work full-time with benefits now. So that's the reason for the increase. Okay. The elections division, our model is to, we're working to ensure that every voter can vote. And we've done that in a number of ways. We've had extended hours in the past, our ballot drop boxes, mailing out election newsletters, and things of that nature. We want to ensure that voters are informed in any way possible. Matter of fact, we established the city clerk service team. So homebound seniors, people who were in the hospital, we went directly to them, and we'll do that again this year if need be, so where they're able to vote. This division goes, one of the main goals for this division, clearly we have 2 more elections to administer, which will be in the new fiscal year, the August state primary and the general election in November, but we will be implementing redistricting. So that actually will start with the August election.
And by redistricting, you mean for the precincts?
Correct.
Of the city.
So previously, the city had 21 precincts, 9 polling locations. You can have up to, according to state law, 2,999 voters in a precinct. So we really had too many precincts in the city. So we reduced the number of precincts from 21 to 18. We haven't reduced any of our sites, so we still will have 9 sites. But a number of the precincts, as relates to council members, where you're probably familiar with, like, for example, in District 7, it was precincts 19, 20, and 21. Well, they're now precincts 16, 17, and 18. So as a part of that, we'll do an education process. Every voter will receive a new voter registration card.
Does that go out this fiscal year?
Yeah, that actually will go out this fiscal year.
Got it.
Yeah. Prior to that, we will send out a newsletter informing them that it's coming. so they don't simply throw away their voter registration card, but we'll also send out a voter registration card as well too. So here is the new map that goes into effect in August.
And is the intention to be able to then now post that new, well, that's at least a precinct map on the city's website? I know that the council district map is basically from 2014.
Correct. So, and you know, we actually will have to do redistricting as it relates to council districts, but that won't be done now. This is just the voter district maps, and we can actually post the map now. The reason why we hadn't posted the map before now was because the special election, we were still under the 21 precincts, so we didn't want voters to be confused.
Understood. Mayor Grimal?
As you just mentioned, after every census, of course, before the following city council election, redistricting needs to be done so that each district has roughly the same population. Right. And understanding that that won't be done this coming fiscal year, do you have a sort of tentative timeline in mind sometime post July 1st of 2023 when you think redistricting should be done? And I'm asking more for longer term budgeting considerations, just because obviously there'll need to be some budget allocation done to help facilitate the redistricting process, either in the 23-24 fiscal year or I guess conceivably the 24-25 fiscal year, but maybe that's cutting it a little too close to the election.
I actually would agree with that, Mayor. I think it should be the next fiscal year, which would be 23-24. So because I think the city council ultimately gets to determine the map. The clerk will give, I know in the past, gave 3 different options, and then the council voted on it, but we also want to get feedback from the public as well too. So during not this upcoming fiscal year, but the next fiscal year as well too. And then those districts would not go into effect until the next council election, which would be 2025.
So are all council members clear on that? Even though we will be updating the district lines, the districts that we respectively represent in those boundaries are in effect for the duration of your term. It would be for in advance of the next council election, but we may do it well in advance of that. It just wouldn't go into effect until those, that election and then that next term of the city council.
Correct.
Pro Tem Carrington?
Oh, yes, thank you, President McGinnis. Clerk Doyle, I just want to thank you for the presentation. Also, I was wondering, I was trying to look for salaries and fringes, and that broke down per position. Could you please, because I didn't see it in the presentation or the budget book, along with the other city positions. So can you please get that to the council?
So it should be in the budget
Did I miss it?
book. So the
I
clerk.
didn't see it unless I overlooked it, but
So actually, the clerk's office consists of departments 102, which is the Charter Commission, 215, which is the city clerk's office, 191, which is elections, and 255, which is marijuana regulations.
okay. All right, I did find it. It's on the last page of the book. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Last page.
So those are just salaries, and then those salaries are allocated amongst those various budgets. In some of the positions, there are 6 full-time positions in the clerk's office, including the clerk's position. But like, for example, the deputy city clerk, 50% of her time is allocated to the Charter Commission. So 50% of her salary is in the Charter Commission budget, and then 50% is in the clerk's budget.
So the deputy clerk will be on hand for the Charter Commission meetings, is that
Yes.
the vision?
Yes, yes. I'll be on hand for some of those meetings as well, especially during the startup phase. But yes, the deputy clerk we'll provide administrative support to the charter.
I think that's a smart step. When I served on the city's Charter Revision Commission, that wasn't able to be fulfilled. There was an outside attorney that was enlisted, but I seem to recall that that was almost universally done pro bono by Attorney Peter Lutzman. But that will be a great resource for the Charter Revision Commission to have that support from the clerk's team.
Right. And then the elections clerk specialist position is divided 50% in the elections budget and 50% in the clerk's budget. And then I think the other three position, the assistant city clerk elections administrator is entirely in the elections budget, and the assistant city clerk regulatory analyst is entirely in the marijuana regulations budget. But if we go back to the presentation, the elections department, the budget actually is decreased by 16.59% from the current fiscal year. And then marijuana regulations is to really implement the medical marijuana application process. As you know, we're pretty much winding that up, and we'll actually begin to be able to implement medical marijuana. The application process is coming to an end this week. If all goes well, the Medical Marijuana Commission appeals hearings will be concluded. We have begun to issue conditional approvals. We did that for the Walton Boulevard Overlay District, but we'll be able to do it for Cesar Chavez, the non-overlay, and the Cesar Chavez overlay districts once the hearings conclude. These are the division goals for marijuana regulations. To review applications timely, we can still receive applications for secure transporter, safety compliance, grower, and processor. We want to transition. We did a lot of professional experts, financial advisors, security consultants, and things of that nature. But we want to, in kind of following the model from Lansing, now that we have some knowledge in-house, we want to actually do more in-house reviews by creating a senior regulatory analyst, senior regulatory compliance analyst position. We want to really work to ensure that all the community benefits that have been pledged to residents are fulfilled. One of the task force members was here, but she had to leave, Ms. Miller. So the clerk has established a advisory task force for medical marijuana implementation. And what we really want to do is to develop a tracking system for community benefits. I've worked a lot of time in city government, and a lot of times businesses don't fulfill those community benefits, and we really want to work to ensure that they fulfill those pledges that they have committed. We want to develop the medical marijuana process is an annual process, so we want to develop a electronic medical marijuana application renewal process. We want to pursue professional development opportunities. We have actually begun doing some of that. If the city approves recreational marijuana, then we want to work on that. As a matter of fact, Mr. Starks is doing some research now where he's looking at all the ordinances I should say that Mr. Starks serves as the Assistant City Clerk Regulatory Analyst, and you're all familiar with the Deputy City Clerk, Ms. Grandison. He's doing research where he's looking at all ordinances throughout the state of Michigan. So we'll be able to offer some recommendations to the council and the mayor if you determine that you do actually want to pursue recreational marijuana. And we really would like the caregiving, the medical marijuana caregiving process is somewhat in planning now, but it really should be like under one particular area. So we want to work on getting a medical marijuana caregiving ordinance approved as well too. And you see here, it was a substantial decrease in the marijuana regulations budget. It's primarily after our talks with the mayor. Since the medical marijuana process is winding down, the professional experts and all that was pretty much removed from the budget. And we don't know what the recreational process will look like, so we can always come back to council with modifying the budget as it relates to recreational marijuana. And just to give you a quick update on the medical marijuana process, when you know what types of licenses are available, application process. These are the top ranked applicants for Cesar Chavez and where they plan to locate. Again, there is still one hearing left for Cesar Chavez before we'll be able to issue conditional approvals to those top 5 applicants. Same thing for downtown. The locations of those top 5 ranked is one hearing for downtown as well left. The Walton, the hearings have concluded, so those rankings are final for Walton, and we have issued conditional approvals for the top 5 ranked provisioning centers for the Walton Boulevard Overlay District. And then primarily this week are the non-overlay district hearings. And you have a sheet here which tells pretty much the status of everybody who has appealed to the commission. There actually have been several appellants who have actually withdrew their appeal since the process has actually started. And then this gives you an update on where we are with grower, processor. We haven't received any safety compliance and secure transporter applications. So we don't have any outstanding applications that have not been reviewed, and that kind of tells you the status of all the applications. And then, of course, you know, we have 3 conditional rezonings. Your honorable body will be considering another conditional rezoning during your regular council meeting this evening. And this is just a graph of the pre-permit process. And then that gives you where applicants are in the conditional approval process, grower and processors. And we'll now begin to add provisioning centers on that list as well. And then this talks about the Citizen Monitoring Task Force. Like I said, we want to really work to ensure that medical marijuana businesses keep their community benefits commitments to the residents. Here, what I've tried to really work on in the clerk's office is when I first became clerk, everybody was kind of operating in a silo. So we're cross-training. So you'll see everybody has primary duties and secondary duties. So if somebody is out, we want to make sure that the clerk's office can flow seamlessly, and these are the staff's primary and secondary duties. And then finally, we're really focused on staff training and professional development. So this is a list of staff certifications that we have completed or are in the process of completing, professional memberships and trainings as well. So I think that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you, Deputy Doyle. Council, any questions? Councilman Goodman.
First of all, I want to say thank you for this. This was very easy to follow along with, very useful in your explanation. And I guess the one thing I just want to point out is, besides thank you for making it easy to read, I also have a question. Is the planned kind of like job redundancy that you have in there, having everyone pretty much prepared to do other roles throughout the department, is that like a newer implementation, or have you been doing that for a while with the staff that you have?
I've been doing that for, in essence, a while, trying to get people cross-trained so where we can make sure that all our work is being completed.
Yeah, I mean, because again, to me, it makes me very happy to see that kind of redundancy set up just in case, someone's out of the office, the entire office doesn't,
Right.
go in the flames.
Right. And I'm sorry, and on that point, I should have acknowledged our Assistant City Clerk Elections Administrator, Jolene Williams. She got married over the weekend.
Oh.
So she's actually on her honeymoon right now, so she won't be back until the beginning of June. But we have started preparing for our August primary election. So yeah, we're seamlessly just rolling along.
Yeah, so I mean, just the first thing I have to say is just good job implementing that. And again, thank you for this presentation as well so far.
Councilman Nicholson.
I'll yield to Councilwoman Mellon.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for doing the pre-work, Clerk Doyle, on looking into recreational ordinances. With the process, hopefully, in my opinion, this council will take that up in this next budget year. Based on the fact that would be council-led, do you foresee many of those ordinances that you're seeing needing these additional supports? As far as this last process we took that was led by the voters had a very robust program involving hearing officers and additional supports and things like that. With the implementation of and the way that those are implemented from where we are now to where the different opportunities that are ahead, do you foresee additional staffing, legal resources being needed if we do decide to take that issue up?
It really depends on what type of ordinance that you lay out. As you mentioned, that was a voter-initiated ordinance. So I guess I would urge the council to somewhat move, because if not, we could be possibly faced with another voter-initiated ordinance, which then we could not, in essence, deviate, in essence, from.
But it sounds like in whichever direction we move in, those ordinances could likely be reviewed by our current city attorney rather than needing additional legal resources.
Sure.
Okay.
Probably, yeah. And I should say, with the new administration, the relationship between the clerk's office and the city attorney is dramatically, in essence, different. Just to
Thank you.
say, yes, yeah.
Councilwoman Rutherford.
Clerk.
Yes, definitely.
Council Rutherford and Councilwoman James.
Good afternoon. First, I want to tell you that you do an amazing job making it plain and making it simple for the residents. I think that's important with open transparency. Quick question. I guess it's was there an increase in y'all salaries, or has it been anything, because there's certain people that's been working there a long time, and they deserve, certain things. So I just want to make sure that we're paying people what they're worth. Everybody else is getting a raise. Why can't we get one? So that's the question.
So there are raises in the budget for the clerk's office staff.
So is it up to the standard of what the job requires? So like if I was to look up, let's say in another city, how much assistant deputy clerk, is it equal or equivalent to what they would actually make? I just want to make sure.
Yes. Okay. So I actually did do some research when I was talking to the deputy mayor. He mentioned, I believe the HR consultant looked at like Waterford, Auburn Hills, and Troy. So I did look at those salaries. So our salaries are, they're not what Troy is, but that's in a sense understandable. But our salaries in essence are in line.
Okay, I just want to make sure we got living wages going on in the clerk office.
Oh, definitely.
That's all. Good job, though, bro.
Thank you.
Councilwoman James.
Yes, I have a question about whether or not there's been any lawsuit activity at all as a result of the implementation of the marijuana process.
So not yet. Well, there was initially a lawsuit. I should change that. It was initially a lawsuit about the way back when the application period, when the 21-day period would be. But as you mean, as a result of conditional approvals, there hasn't been yet. Okay. More than likely, there probably will be. From my understanding, in every community that has implemented, there has been lawsuits. That's just the nature of the marijuana.
Well, I still have to say that, given all of the obstacles that, it's amazing that we have gotten to this point without lawsuits and without, those kinds of things. So this has been tremendously well done job.
Thank you.
Council, do we have any other questions? Yeah. Councilman Parker.
First of all, thank you for the report that you gave us, and it certainly is very well laid out, very professionally done. You had mentioned that because of the rejection that new voter cards will go out, will they be out in time for people for the next voting cycle?
Yes, so they'll be out prior to the August primary. because that's when the when the new precincts go into effect. They go into effect for the August 2022 primary.
Other than the voting cards themselves, how will this change in some of the redistricting be communicated to the citizens?
So we plan to do a newsletter. As you know, the clerk's office has done newsletters before. We will do a newsletter because a lot of times voters actually will just simply throw their voter registration cards in essence away. So we will do a news and include in there, be on the lookout for your voter registration card as well too. And then we are on social media, so we will be promoting it that way. We'll make announcements at the council meeting as well too.
This may sound like a really dumb question because in my head it's out there, but will the absentee ballot boxes change in their locations as well?
No.
Yeah. Any Councilman Parker? Any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay. Councilwoman Rutherford, and then Councilman Goodman.
Just for, does the city clerk have a Twitter page as well as other than a Facebook page?
We do.
And we also have an Instagram?
We do.
Okay, so wouldn't it be easier if we put that out as well through like e-blasts or what, you know how when people sign up they normally give their emails and stuff like that? Would we be able to do that?
We do. We have maybe about over 3,000 voters' email addresses. We try to get, especially those who are on our AV permanent list, as they complete their applications, there is a spot for an email address. Everybody won't share the email address, and then sometimes people change emails, but we do send out things as well as through emails.
My other question is the quarterly letter that you normally send out. When is the next? Is it going to be quarterly or is it just going to be like semi-annually, like every 6 months?
Well, it hasn't necessarily been quarterly or semi-annually. It's more based upon needing to get important information out. So, like I said, we will do one as relates to redistricting. We will also, because prior to every election, we're now doing a sample ballot.
Right.
So we'll do that before, in essence, every election. And then I think the mayor has mentioned something about a citywide newsletter. So it may not necessarily be a need for the clerk to do its own newsletter going forward.
Right, and I do know the executive side is going to be doing a newsletter along with the council. I just wanted to know because we have so many major pressing issues on voters' right, regulations and things of that nature, and knowing what to do and how to make sure that we're getting the information to people effectively and efficiently. So that's why I asked that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Goodman.
Just a couple clarifying questions. There are two spots in here.
Use your mic, sir, please.
There are two spots in here where there is a line item in the amended budget for medical insurance, both in the elections fund, in elections department. So 101191716.000, and also in the marijuana regulations one, so 101255716.000. That it was amended. It was seems to be no activity accrued to date, and also it's in the recommended budget. So I just wanted to know, essentially, was that expense put somewhere else for employees in that department, or did someone not receive medical insurance? I just want to follow up on those numbers.
So that actually would be a question for finance. I believe all staff is actually taking the medical insurance, but I wouldn't necessarily know that. That would be HR finance.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you give me the departments again?
So it would be fund number 101191716.000, and then the second one would be 101255716.000. So again, like activity to date, there is no number there. However, it is budgeted for the coming fiscal year. And my question is, one, why, since there was nothing in there for this year, and why it's in there again this for this upcoming fiscal year? And also, for my own want and desire to make sure that everyone in the clerk's office has been receiving medical benefits if they've chosen to have so.
Sure. So, as Garland indicated, I believe everyone in here, in these departments are indeed receiving coverage as opposed to the opt-out. With the medical insurance, in some instances, we do a year-end allocation within general fund. For departments outside of general fund, like if you look at the court, we do try and track that on a regular basis. But essentially, historically, the allocations to the departments have been done as part of our year-end closeout on the financial statements. Because the way we're required, we have to do manual journal entries for that, and so we generally have been doing them on a year-end basis for those charges. Again, for a department where it's outside of the general fund, such as the court, we have begun doing those throughout the fiscal year.
The thing that I'm still getting to, however, and again, I may just be a little bit confused with this, because I'm looking at the fund for the city clerk in general. Obviously, the majority of the wages are there, as well as the medical insurance. That's where the bulk of that number is. And so, what I'm asking is, are the clerk's office employees' medical insurance paid out of the fund that would typically, well, that is in here, 101-215-716-000.
They're not paid directly out of that. They're paid out of a city, a general city account, and we then charge those back to the respective departments based on the employees who are receiving the coverage, and that's part of the manual recording that we have to do. So when we pay the actual medical coverages, they're not paid out of these, because each department has individual general ledger accounts. We don't pay them pay the bills from these individual general ledger accounts. They're paid from one central account, and then we at the year end we then distribute those to the departments as they're broken down by employee.
Okay.
Any other questions, Councilman Goodman?
There is one more. I don't know who would be answering this. Also, just the difference with the line item for ordinances, which would be 101-215-902.004, and I just want some type of roadmap or guidance as to the small realization on the budget, really about a sixth of it, and then the I guess the desired decrease from the original 30,000 to 20,000, and I guess just kind of a roadmap and understanding of the difference in these numbers at the moment.
So the ordinance account is all ordinances have to actually be published. Before you can approve an ordinance, we have to publish an ordinance summary. And then after you approve the ordinance, we have to publish the actual, in essence, ordinance. Most of the time it's in the Oakland Press. So the previous fiscal year, I believe we were over budget, so I added more money to the budget. But this past fiscal year, I realized we didn't spend the whole 30,000, so I decreased that number. It's just a gauge. I really can't tell. It really depends on your honorable body, how many ordinances if you go on an ordinance spree, then, and it also deals with the length of the ordinance, because we're have to publish out. So if they're small ordinances, the fee is not high. But, if it's a detailed ordinance, then it could be thousands of dollars. So,
thank you.
Okay. Well, definitely thank you for that clarity. Councilman Parker.
Thank you, sir. Real quick question. One I've noticed, and I've probably noticed this in every one of our budgeted sessions, is that we seem to have not budgeted a whole lot across the board for the next fiscal year for COVID salary. Do you think COVID will stop in June?
So that will be an administration issue. The only thing that, as far as I know, that was done for employees, it was all employees who were here from, March of 2020 through June of 2021. Was it June of 2020? I think it was June of 2020. We received a $2,000 one-time COVID increase. Other than that, there hasn't been anything allocated for COVID. There was, through the elections, I would say, we did increase elections workers' pay during the height of COVID. We really were underpaying election workers, so we did greatly increase during the 2020 election. And in addition to that, I had received a grant from the Center for Tech in Civic Life, so I was able to really increase. We're not paying workers what we were paying them in 2020, but we're not paying them what we were paying them pre-COVID as well either. So,
All right, thank you. Mayor Grimal, I'm sorry.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Sorry to ignore it. Line item number 101-215942, copier lease. Unless I missed it, you only gonna pay $840 for them to rent a copy?
So that's copier costs are like spread across the board, and Mr. Carrington can, spread across the board as it relates to departments, and Mr. Carrington can address that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilman. So yes, that's a allocation that we have been doing, where we have a central charge. It's kind of similar to insurance. We pay it out of one account, and then we spread it around to the individual departments. For the upcoming fiscal year, we put all those charges into one account. We thought it would be easier for tracking purposes because some of the amounts tended to be fairly small. So for tracking purposes, we've put all of those into the IT department. So they've been centralized, and we're no longer allocating those to individual departments.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Okay, got Mayor Grimal. Yes, sir. Thank you. Mayor Grimal.
One is more of a question. The other is I have a comment. But in terms of my question, and both of these relate to the COVID salary or COVID wage component, was that money, Mr. Carrington, used? Did that come from the general fund, or were those CARES Act dollars from the federal government? What was the origin of that lump sum payment?
They were CARES Act monies, and they were COVID related funding. I believe it was CARES Act. I know there were multiple bills, but I believe that they were CARES Act, which allowed for a type of hazard pay, if you will, and not in a we didn't utilize it in a technical sense, but that was the source of the fund.
Yeah, Ms. Sharp, is that your understanding as well?
So I just wanted to elaborate. So the items that are in the budget, that was separate from the payments that the employees receive for the hazard pay. So the administration put those items in the budget, and I know the last budget, I don't believe that council actually approved those COVID expenses because that was winding down, but the employees received a one-time payment for that should have been like hazard pay from the CARES Act.
Yeah.
But these line items have nothing to do with that.
Yeah. So
okay.
To Attorney Sharp's point, I think back in FY21 at the original phase of the COVID pandemic, the city was attempting to try and track salaries and expenses specifically related to COVID. I don't think, I think at the time there wasn't a full understanding of how we would necessarily recoup certain costs and the like, and we really just had not continued that practice, primarily because much of the funding and the like was not being done in a way that it really benefited us from trying to track costs in that way when we look at some of the COVID relief acts and bills that came through. So it was a short-term practice that the city had installed.
Okay, so in the current fiscal year, which is to say July 1st, 21 through June 30th of 2022, those CARES Act salaries and wages, were those federal dollars that were used, or were they general fund dollars that were used?
They were federal relief dollars that were brought in through the general fund. So the payments to the employees were paid out of the general fund, and they were used to fund that. It was the CARES Act funding was used for that.
Okay, Ms. Sharp, you have a different understanding?
I'm not sure what should have happened and what did happen is I'm unclear about, but I just know that, again, every employee received a one-time payment. Now, whether or not certain departments received hazard pay, such as DPW, on more than one occasion, I can't answer that. But again, as it relates to the budget, with the last budget, those COVID expenses were not included. Because those are line items of expenses. That wasn't for hazard pay. None of those were for hazard pay.
But we ended up ultimately, we didn't budget for anything at this time last year for the current fiscal year. But we
didn't approve it.
Right, but we did at some time, I believe we paid it out in the fall. We did put in the hazard pay that was paid out from the CARES Act.
But again, that hazard pay is
did
not
City
reflected.
Council approve that, Mr.
Yes.
Carrington?
Yep.
They approved the hazard pay, the one-time payment, but again,
Okay.
that's not, if you look at the budget and look at the respective departments with COVID, that's not showing the hazard pay payment.
So where
That's like a different line. Am I correct? I mean, these are not, if you look at each department when you have COVID, just as COVID salaries, these don't really reflect the payments that you issued. Because I remember, again, council not necessarily approving those expenses.
And when they adopted the budget.
Correct.
Correct, but we then later approved the hazard pay.
All right.
Okay.
Well, let's.
In any event, where I'm going with this, if I may, President Pro Tem,
Yes.
is I know Councilman Parker has asked about COVID salaries and wages. You know, I would say a couple of things. It sounds like the bonus pay and lump sum payments to employees utilized federal dollars, not general fund dollars. It sounds like everyone agrees on that history. So I would just caution City Council about not allocating funds for that purpose when we don't have a federal revenue stream dedicated for that purpose, number one. But number two, although COVID's not going anywhere, it is now the new normal. It is not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere next year. It's not going anywhere the year after that. It's going to be here forever. And so the idea of continuing to pay hazard pay for COVID, I would argue, just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. We need to figure out what a fair wage and fair salary is. We need to figure out what we need to pay people to retain them and to attract good people. But COVID is going to be here. It's going to be here for the rest of our lives. And we're going to have probably, new pandemics that crop up over time too. I mean, we've seen these news reports over monkeypox, which I don't think is going to be anything like COVID. But the point is, we're going to continue to have various health challenges that come up. And so, I don't think we can afford to just continue to pay lump sums because we want to be generous for its own sake. We need to figure out what we need to pay to retain and attract good people and what's fair, and build that into base pay, base wages, as opposed to continuing to move forward with a COVID-specific bonus pay, in my view.
Thank you, Mayor Grammel. I know Councilwoman James has some questions, but I just want the council to know that I want to try to close up, so we got a 6 p.m. meeting, so it gives us time enough to rest a little bit, get bathroom breaks, get water, eat some food before that 6 p.m. meeting. So, Councilwoman James.
Yeah, I pass.
You pass? All right, thank you. Clerk, we'd like to thank you and your department for your presentation. It was definitely appreciated. We can tell that you went to great lengths to make sure we understood your departments. So,
Thank you.
Silly, thank you. Do we have any public comment for today's meeting?
No, Mr. President.
All right. No, you have to be able to sign up before the meeting. Okay, all right. Okay, all right, thank you. At this time, can I get a motion for adjournment?
Support.
It's been moved by Councilman Nicholson, supported by Councilman Goodman. Hearing no discussion, when Clerk Doyle gets to his seat, he can call roll call.
State.
Nicholson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Rutherford,
Yes.
Carrington,
Yes.
Goodman,
Yes.
James.
Yes.
6 yeas, no nays.
I ain't in the mood right now. I'm ordering. I'm trying
Thank
to
everyone.
dress for the white part.